Writing a good villain can sometimes be one of the most difficult parts of writing any story. And then here comes Araki, banger after banger of a villain, one after another. This man just cannot miss. I mean, Dio, Kira, Diavolo, Pucci. The JoJo series genuinely has some of the best written villains in all of anime that are actually terrifying and threatening. And out of all of these villains though, one of them stands above the rest. A villain that low-key has a kind of good point into why he's evil, but also goes about achieving that in a way that's, well, the most evil way, and a villain that does it for nothing more than his country, and my personal favorite villain of the JoJo series, and that's the President of the United States, Funny Valentine. Now, I know that saying Valentine is JoJo's best villain is a big thing to say, considering, well, Dio and Yoshikage Kira, also Diego, which you guys all know I am basically Diego's #1 fan, but hear me out, because by the end of this video, I can almost guarantee you that you'll either agree with me or you'll at least understand my reasonings into saying this. To understand how we even get to the point of Valentine being a villain, we have to look at what made him even become a villain, and lucky for us, we have a pretty detailed backstory for him. But when you read online, it's sometimes overlooked that Valentine actually has two backstories, one from a hidden chapter that's often forgotten that paints Valentine in a very different light. The original story that most people know of Valentine's backstory is almost written as a poetic, perfect American background. Born as the son of a soldier that not only fought, but also died for this country by being tortured to death for refusing to give up his team's information, just for then Valentine's stepfather to be the one to tell him this story and marry Valentine's mother, which is why he even has the name Valentine. From a young age, this instilled a lot of patriotism in him, with Valentine later growing up to become not only a Harvard graduate, but then also joining the army himself as well, later himself being captured and tortured just like his father, but this time Valentine survives, literally getting the coolest scar you can think of him actually having a scar of the American flag on his back. And as Ant-Man said,
"As far as I'm concerned, that's America's ass."
Even after surviving this though, during an army exercise in the San Diego desert, Valentine and his company basically all die. But just Valentine's luck, he happens to land right on top of the corpse heart, that being the corpse of literally Jesus Christ, gaining power from it, not only reviving him, but also causing him to be the only one from his company to return alive. But then after his service, he becomes a politician, quickly rising through the ranks to become the President of the United States, is what they want you to believe. You see, that is almost a perfect American story, and this is the story that you're led to believe is the backstory of Valentine. Pretty simple, right? A Harvard graduate, a veteran who survived being tortured, the only one of his company to survive, a politician, and then now the President of the United States. Not someone who gained his rise to power by, well, using other people around him. Chapter 30.5 tells a very different perspective on Valentine's upbringing, this time starting off at the point that he's already a representative for the US Congress, and when a Puritan minister comes to America from England, he discovers a map, and not really knowing its significance or purpose, but he goes along with the Puritan on an expedition to find the spots marked on the map. Yet only Valentine is the one to return from it, and according to him, he says that the rest of them just got trapped in some quicksand, but mysteriously he was able to come out alive, and also come out alive with the corpse heart. Suddenly then still rising through the ranks to quickly become the president, and then shortly after meeting Steven Steele to set up the Steel Ball Run race to find the remaining corpse parts. It's pretty interesting that Araki wrote two backstories for Valentine, one writing him in a very patriotic light, while the other one paints him in a very mysterious light that makes you question what he might have had to do to get the corpse part, and why he was the only one mysteriously to happen to survive it. And we're never given confirmation on which one of these is actually the true story of Valentine, but as we're later going to discuss and we learn more about what he does, you can probably guess which one is true and which one isn't. With Valentine, one thing as a JoJo's fan that you'll hear a lot of, whether it be online or just random people talking about Steel Ball Run, is the notion that Valentine is a good guy and that he's the type of villain that low-key kinda has a point. Similar to other anime villains like Lelouch or Stain or Griffith, who arguably actually did nothing wrong. Alright, I'm joking. We all know Griffith did almost everything wrong. But just like Griffith and the whole memo of not doing anything wrong, Valentine is kind of treated the same way, even though this guy is arguably just pure evil. But the thing is, that's okay, and that's how a villain should be, and that's why I think that Valentine is Jojo's scariest villain, which also makes him Jojo's best villain. Now, to answer the question of is Valentine evil and does he kind of have a good point for what he's doing? If I were to tell you that there's a figure who wants to create a perfect society, and to do so he wants to gain ultimate power to basically rule the world and will stop at absolutely nothing to do so, 3 people can probably pop into your mind. The first being a little mustache man who I won't name, but Kanye loves to say that he's a fan of.
Done with the classifications, every human being has something of value that they brought to the table. Especially
Valentine,
Griffith, and then Valentine. Yet 2 of those are known to be very evil, but apparently Valentine is just the one that's praised as just a villain who has good intentions. So you can see what I mean when I say I don't subscribe to the Valentine having good intentions club. And in many ways, Valentine and Griffith can almost be like the same character. Griffith is obviously very evil, and think about the worst things that he did throughout Berserk. He used people, he killed multiple people, also the horrible thing that he did to Casca. Then you look at Valentine, who did all of that as well, even attempting to force himself onto a 14-year-old Lucy for her to bear his child, which honestly, we could have done Steel Ball Run without that Araki, but I guess it is what it is. And that alone should instantly get Valentine banished straight to the Shadow Realm. And although I don't really like that part, I do gotta say, seeing how Valentine was attempting to do all of that to Lucy was honestly terrifying to read, and I truly think that's one of JoJo's actually most scariest moments throughout the entire series. And something that honestly I feel like if they ever do make the Steel Ball Run anime, they're just gonna have to heavily censor that because that is just terrifying to read. Valentine all throughout Steel Ball Run though was honestly just very scary in some points. He even had me just like shaking in my boots reading it. I talked about this briefly in my last video about Gyro in the final fight of Gyro versus Valentine. After like 10 chapters of Valentine fighting through multiple people and then now fighting against Gyro, Gyro, after achieving the golden spin, hits Valentine, successfully knocking him out. Just for Valentine, literally like the Undertaker, to just rise up basically from the dead, telling Gyro that he made a mistake. Like, imagine how much both Johnny and Gyro's hearts just dropped in that moment. But an even more insanely scary aura moment from Valentine is right in the next chapter after he finishes off Gyro, as Johnny is sitting there hysterically crying at the sight of what just happened to his friend, Valentine's, whose face is now half age, and he honestly kind of looks like a horror movie villain anyways. You just see him start slowly walking towards Johnny to come do the same to him. Like, this panel alone is one of my favorites of Steel Ball Run, but can you just imagine how actually terrifying that moment has to be for Johnny? All throughout Steel Ball Run, Valentine is really just a force of pure evil. He sent multiple assassins to kill both Johnny and Gyro in an attempt to gain the corpse parts, and basically use these assassins as pawns that he did not care for, and we can see that as an example of when he just offs Axl Row after he resurrected Johnny. And when you really look at all the things Valentine has done, it makes it so much crazier to think of him as the president of the United States. Like, can you imagine in the JoJo worlds if after the events of Steel Ball Run, it's revealed of all of the things the president did before he just mysteriously died? The JoJo media and news companies of this world must just be having to work triple overtime with no breaks at all to try and report all of this. Not only reporting that their president is a mass murderer killing both innocent people and other politicians, but also that he just suddenly became skinny. Like, imagine if one day your fat president just shows up on the stand and he's now skinny. I'm sure the citizens of Steel Ball Run were probably pretty confused about that. But another truly terrifying thing about Valentine is when you think about it, he's doing all of this stuff for supposedly the benefit of America. And he really does care about his country. He's a very patriotic president. Until you really think about it and you realize that him having the power of the corpse parts for America may sound good, but that would just basically throw the entire world into just nothing but chaos. Imagine world politics, but this time the president of the United States literally has the powers bestowed upon him of the corpse of Jesus Christ. And then also having D4C, which that alone is just broken enough. When you compare Valentine to other villains or JoJos, they all in their own rights do evil things, and I'm not here to compare evil versus evil, but each JoJo villain I personally feel like have a different way about being evil. But out of all of the villains, the two that stick out to me as arguably the most evil and more than just a normal villain would be both Dio and Diavolo. Dio's way of being evil is just honestly disrespectful and manipulative. He's always mocking his enemies all throughout his fight fights, basically just taunting them and exerting his power over them. But not only does he also just kill people with no remorse and sends assassins after the Crusaders, one of the most disrespectful and just truly most downright evil things that Dio did was that time that he told Polnareff that he would help him find the person who basically abused and killed his sister, despite not only lying to him, but also being the person to hire this guy to his team. That is just so evil. And Diavolo is more evil by control, as he's not only the founder of a basically substance dealing crime syndicate who also wants to rule all of Italy, but you can see the effects of this all throughout the Italy of Part 5, with people like Bruno losing his father due to the substances that the gang is responsible for, and just the amount of crime within Italy during Part 5, all of it being masterminded by Diavolo, who seeks to have absolute rule over all of Italy. But the difference to me is both Dio and Diavolo's evil works really just stop at their own personal self. They only want to be evil for whatever they want, but with Valentine being literally the president of the United States, he seeks something different, and that's total world domination and control. And not only that, but with the powers of D4C, he can do that not only in this universe, but basically every universe that exists, as the corpse part is only in this universe, so he would be the only one with that power. And he truly would do absolutely everything to gain this. What if that means him using those around him by manipulating them with his high charisma for things like what he did to Lucy and how he continued to manipulate her through the use of the corpse parts, through the love train arc, and his use of D4C to control every universe in existence, as he would truly just be unstoppable. But all of this is what a villain should be, except for the Lucy part. We can just honestly do without that, but a villain should just be pure evil, and they should be a very threatening and menacing force. So it's okay to acknowledge that yes, a villain could have a reason for fighting, and that reason could in a way be understood and justifiable. But having a good reason, but then going about it by just killing everyone and ruining the world in the process does not make for it at all. But what that does make is a very interesting villain to read, and my personal favorite villain of the entire JoJo Bizarre Adventure series. And I just truly just can't wait for Silbar 1 to become an anime. It's going to be so much fun to finally see this adapted.